Hello everybody and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today, and today we're going to take a look at the Columbia, which is the Cleveland once the US cruiser split happens. Now, do keep in mind, and this is very important, that this ship is a work in progress. Everything I show you, everything I talk about can and potentially will change. Now this episode is a little bit different than the normal sort of work in progress video that I do, namely because this ship is just in her current state so absolutely abysmal. In fact, this video was originally finished yesterday, and I didn't release it because I didn't like the tone of the video, because I could say, incredibly negative about the ship. So, went to sleep, woke up today, and decided, you know what, I can probably make something that maybe is a little bit more productive, maybe more helpful. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the ship in her current state, and what I think she might need, and what maybe the US light cruiser line will need as a whole to, I guess, work out in a certain way. Because right now, I'm not sure about the Tier 10 because we haven't had access to that ship yet, but geez, the Cleveland at 8 is a very miserable ship. And I'll sort of go section by section. First things first, survivability. This ship has very little in the ways of survivability. If you look at her armor, she's got 25mm plating, and this basically gets overmatched by every battleship that looks at you the wrong way at the tiers that you're going to be playing at. And she ends up taking a lot of damage, whether that's citadel damage or penetration damage. So that's really not good. If you take a look at her hit points too, fully upgraded, she's at 36,900. Her stock hull is just a touch over 30k. So if you're running up against a battleship, that is, at least the higher tier battleships, that's basically 2 to 3 citadels and a couple of other random overpens or penetrations. And that's it. And you pretty much could be deleted in one shot. Just like, I guess, other tier 8 light cruisers, except they actually have additional means to mitigate stuff. The Columbia doesn't. Maybe I should just call it the Cleveland, because that is really what it is. But this ship really doesn't have that ability. She is completely dependent. I mean, literally 100% dependent on hugging an island and making that island your waifu. That is this ship's sort of sole survival mechanism. If you look at Kutuzov, and if you look at Edinburgh, and you look at these other light cruisers that we have in the game, they have ways of mitigating damage. In terms of the UK light cruisers, they've got smoke. They also have that heal that can bring them back as well. Right? Kutuzov has smoke. It also has good range, so you can stand off more. Columbia has none of these things, and she doesn't even have that range really to stand off either. So survivability really poor. And I think in terms of fixing it, this is one of the places where something could be done. So, and there's a couple of things that I think could be explored. One, maybe giving Columbia a heal would be interesting. So all the US light cruiser line will have a heal, but maybe not smoke, right? Because smoke is a pretty much a Royal Navy thing, I guess, right? So let's sort of keep it like that. So maybe not smoke, but maybe a heal. Heal could be useful. Other things that could be done, maybe reduce these plating from 25mm and actually really cut it down. Make it like really thin. Because potentially, if you have really thin plating, what you end up having when a battleship shoots at you is a lot of overpen damage. Instead of right now, where the armor is not enough to auto-bounce anything, but at the same time, your armor is enough for the shells to hit, to arm, and then to explode inside your ship and do a lot of penetration damage. So maybe that's something that can be explored, just to help with the survivability aspect. Artillery. This is the other sort of major problem with the ship. She does have a nice number of guns, and if you are actually able to start hitting things, you can do reasonable damage. The problem primarily lies in the fact that you have no range. Fully upgraded, you have 14.6 kilometer range. So that's not good at all. And on top of that, you have the USN light cruiser arc, the Cleveland arc, where to get to 14.6 kilometer range, your shells take 12 seconds roughly to travel. And so That's a very, very, very poor arc. You know, Kutuzov takes the same amount of time to get out to like 19.1 kilometers. So Colombia really lacking in this department as well. And like I said, you know, ships like the Chappie, right, which doesn't have a smoke, at least it has range. At least it can stand off more. Colombia's problem is it just doesn't have that. In fact, when you're facing off in the tier sort of 8 to 10 maps, those maps tend to be really big as well. So even if you do get yourself behind a very, very nice island, you often find that the enemy is just outside your range. I had this problem where I was playing battles, and I'm like, yes, I found an island, but it doesn't matter, because every ship on the enemy team was just outside my range. And it becomes almost a lot like just sitting around and waiting for something to happen, waiting for potentially an enemy ship to just sail into your range. Yes, you have a scout plane, but that scout plane only lasts so long. So, potentially, the way to fix the Colombia's sort of deficiencies is maybe, when it comes to these upgrade modules, to give her that ability to maybe install that range module. Either that, or maybe even to have a choice between the range or the rate of fire module. So, hey, if she does get into range, she's super deadly, or she can offer more range. Although the problem is, you know, do remember this, Wargaming doesn't really like to change sort of the ballistics of the way that guns work, right? Because if they start to change things like muzzle velocity or air drag values, it tends to impact the way penetration occurs. And so they don't tend to like doing that. So I feel like the changes will have to be more sort of like a module, right? Where maybe the US light cruisers will have that module earlier than everybody else. You know, maybe alternatively, and other things to consider, is maybe you can have a special spotter plane. So maybe instead of giving it sort of a standard spotter plane, maybe it's got kind of like the way that, let's say, the Perth has that sort of special smoke. Maybe you can give the Columbia a special spotter plane where it's got sort of long activity time, very low cooldown, something like that maybe could be an alternative to work out this range problem. But again, do keep in mind that a long range for Columbia is a bit of a struggle, and it does take some getting used to. You know, and that's it. In terms of guns, there's not all that much that can be changed, unfortunately. And this is sort of one of the ways the game has been designed, that there's a lot of things that really can't be fiddled around with. Maybe make the reload faster. Could be an alternative. But again, too much rapid fire HE spam is also not all that great for the game as well, right? So that is something that they have to balance out. So potentially early access to range module, or maybe just a special scout plane, could be a way to fix this particular problem. So in terms of strengths, the Cleveland has pretty decent AA, and the same sort of carries over when she's at tier 8. Although, you know, for the weaknesses that she has, the AA really isn't that big of an advantage, considering that Kutuzov's AA is pretty much on par, if not stronger, than the Cleveland at tier 8. So the AA advantage really isn't all that big, I would say. Maximum speed, maneuverability, these are all okay, although, you know, again, 32.5 knots for a cruiser isn't all that fast, especially when you're considering that battleships at tiers 8, 9, and 10 are starting to run into that 30-knot range. And really, with the lack of her gun arcs, and, you know, sort of those really crazy arcs, and the short range, she's not really much of a kiting cruiser either. Although I don't really think that's anything really that you're going to be adjusting in terms of maneuverability. I just don't feel like that's going to be making much of a difference, considering she has these other major flaws. But again, like I said, there could be solutions to survivability and artillery that might make her a better ship. She does have a very good concealment, though. If you throw on the concealment module and the captain's skill, the concealment expert skill, you can get her detectability on the surface down to 9.1, which is pretty good. So you are pretty stealthy. So you think that maybe Cleveland can go ahead and be a destroyer hunter, right? So a destroyer goes in front of you and then you sort of follow up behind it. Unfortunately, that's not really doable either. She's got a bit of a clunky consumable setup. She has radar, but the radar is not a very long-lasting radar. It lasts 30 seconds and only goes out to 9 kilometers, which is not that great of a range. And on top of that, she can't stack radar and hydro together. They're sort of, you know, in the same slot. She has access to defensive fire, but you don't always see carriers. And I'm wondering if maybe they don't want to put hydroacoustic onto defensive fire, because that sort of gives you that Belfast problem again. But I feel like the ship maybe could have something unique here in the consumables. Maybe just give it a good USN radar. That goes out to maybe 9.45, 9.9, and have it have that longer USN duration as well. Maybe that would be the solution for her as well. And at least she could be a kind of a useful radar boat as well. Still, consumables and all that, that's sort of small things, because really she just has these big issues that need to be addressed, because the ship right now in her current state is pretty much unplayable. There's no situation at tier 8, 9, and 10 where this ship right now is playable. So for me personally, I think I'm going to wait until they buff her a little bit more, so she's a bit more competitive, a bit more playable, before I show you gameplay, because I really don't want to show you something so early on that completely ruins your impression of the ship, because she is just terrible right now, and hopefully something else gets fixed. One other side note, and this is something that lately I've been thinking about, we are starting to get clear light cruiser, heavy cruiser lines, and we also have destroyers that are specifically dedicated to hitting certain classes of ships. Maybe what we can do is, and I don't know if Wargaming is ever going to think about this kind of stuff, but maybe what we can have is an actual split in classification between light and heavy cruisers, and the light cruisers, let's say, along with destroyers, are going to be immune to Pan-Asian deep water torpedoes, versus everybody else that's still affected by those. Things like that. That could be an interesting situation for this particular kind of ship, where she can sort of go after destroyers, but sort of give her that extra layer of defense against them. Something to consider, right? Because one other thing, again, if you want to make her a destroyer hunter in the current state, it's like I said, it's not really possible. You have that radar, but then you don't have that hydro backing you up, so you can't have that early warning against torpedoes, and you don't really have much of a torpedo defense, right? 4% stock with the module at 7%, and you get hit by torpedoes, you die very, very quickly. So stuff I think definitely for wargaming to think about, and maybe to implement, and maybe in the next version of the ship it'll be better and it'll be more playable, and when I make a video then and show you some gameplay footage, it'll actually look like a somewhat decent ship, I hope. Anyways, what do you guys think now that you've sort of gone through this video with me? Do you think my suggestions are okay? Do you have suggestions of your own? Of course, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Aside from all that, folks, have yourselves a very good weekend, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.